Welcome here to CES and the IMC Theater. My name is Fred Yentz. I'm the CEO of IoT Launch, and I've got the pleasure of moderating a panel which is really focused on latest techs driving consumer IoT. And I'm joined by two brilliant folks in the industry, Jim Morrish, who is the founding partner of Transforma Insights, and Renil, Paramel, who is the co-founder and CEO of Strategy of Things. So we're going to have a discussion, open discussion. If there's places that you guys want to jump in and lead this, I don't need to moderate the whole thing. We'll kick it off and we'll have I think a really good talk. So first of all, we'll start on the topic, the title of the session, Latest Tech Driving Consumer IoT. Just opening thoughts, introduce yourself a little bit more than I did introduce you, and give us some of your initial thoughts about that topic.
Okay, sure. So thank you for that introduction. So my name's Jim Morrish. I'm half of the founding partners of Transforma Insights. We're a firm focused on digital transformation of enterprise and all of the technologies enabling that. And in terms of the latest tech driving consumer IoT, it strikes me that it's not about an individual technology. It's about a range of technologies that are evolving and coming to a point where it's enabling quite interesting use cases and things that we can do today that would have been much harder 5 years ago. So it's about an emerging technology environment and the use cases that makes possible. But it is always the use case that drives the adoption, not the technology. Consumers don't care about technology. They want something that does something which is of some utility to them, would be my view.
Okay, very good. Interesting point. So Renil, what do you have to say? Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit of some opening thoughts about tech driving usage.
First, thank you very much for inviting me over here. It's fantastic to be back here at CES. So my name is Renil Paramel. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Strategy of Things. We're an innovation consulting firm based in Silicon Valley. We worked a lot in the space of smart cities and emerging technologies like IoT. So we've been working with clients for the past 4 or 5 years. We've been attending CES and various other conferences. I would say from a consumer IoT perspective, I'm definitely seeing a lot of huge improvements in what I would say digital healthcare. I think the whole concept of being able to track personal information of your activities, your health, and using that to potentially create a profile for yourself to improve your health is just fascinating. And seeing some of the folks who have come here, I'm really impressed to see how AI has been added on top of the data that sensing has created, and now we're able to get to a completely different form. So digital healthcare, very interesting. And the other place I would say is asset tracking. We've seen a lot of things like air tags and tiles that's come from various companies, and we're now seeing that, hey, somebody who lost their luggage on United told them that I know exactly where my luggage is, and it was not the location that United told them where it was. So we have consumers having completely different set of data, able to do very fascinating things. So I'll just stop there with my initial 2 areas.
So very interesting openings. So both of you talked about use cases, not so much about a revolutionary new tech. You mentioned AI, of course, Remo, but let's think about that use case for the consumer who now knows more about where their luggage is than maybe the airline. Is visibility, what's driving consumer demand? So some of it is the tech, but ultimately to be successful in the consumer space, you've got to drive demand. What do you think's driving some of those demands?
So, IoT is a great technology, but a great technology doesn't do anything till it solves a problem. So I think when you start looking at consumers, it's the pain points that you need to get addressed. So if I'm losing my luggage, and if I don't know where that is, that's creating a lot of stress for me because I don't know when I'm going to get the luggage back. I don't know what I need to do to wait for that luggage, or if it doesn't come, what do I need to do? So for consumers, it's all about relieving stress. So I think any technology that can eventually help someone eliminate stress, I think will have some traction. I mentioned about digital healthcare. How does that help? Well, if I know exactly whether I need to do 10,000 steps or 12,000 steps, I can make a better judgment of can I lose weight or can I stay fit versus thinking I want to be good, but I'm really not sure that I'm getting there or not. So I think we are in an era where data is available, and we're going to continuously see consumers making better and better decisions based on that.
Great. So Jim, to that question, you said use cases.
Yeah.
Tell us about kind of the consumer demand for use cases.
Yes, I will do it, and I'll pick up on that on the pain point, and potentially expand on that a little. So as you mentioned healthcare and some of the healthcare applications there, and you're beginning at that point to get into enhanced value add. I mean, these things are just better than what came before, and it doesn't, and as you well know, it doesn't just stop with trackers. There's much more complicated things, and combining those different data sources, so you can combine your tracker information with logs of your calorie intake, with tracking of weight from connected scales, and potentially more medical devices. There's a whole range of healthcare data that can be combined into a value-added solution. Interestingly, there's also a cost reduction argument. So a lot of and this is an emerging trend, I think, which is around effectively dumb IoT. So the reality is, we all carry around with us, smartphones, things like this. These are highly sophisticated devices with great interfaces which can be configured with software. If you can connect that to a device, you can control the device, and then you don't need the hardware to control the device on the device, because you've rendered it all down into software, some fairly generic hardware, and a Bluetooth communication to a handset. So things that fit into that kind of category are something like a connected dishwasher, or a connected subwoofer. In the case of a connected subwoofer, just a bass loudspeaker, you can actually pull all the controls off that onto a handset, and the device basically just has an on-off switch. At that point, you don't have to design any of the controls, physical controls, into the device. You don't need to invest in the cost, and you've made a more resilient and robust product. And at lower manufacturing cost. And potentially there's also something around the cash flow profiling, offering devices, offering something as a service, or sharing the cost, or partially servitizing the model, and actually getting away from an initial upfront capital expense. So there's a number of other things, generic drivers of adoption. I noticed I've not mentioned use cases, but maybe I'll pause there, and I'm happy to come back and mention some specific use cases, which is your question.
So cost is a big thing, right? As you said,
emerging significant.
Emergingly more significant, you said?
Yeah, I'd say so. At the moment, I think it's pain points is the first adoption. This is a real problem which I need fixing, and this fixes it. The next one is value added. IoT makes this better. The next one, I think, and the thing that will drive probably the highest number of connections and the highest just assimilation of IoT into our life, will be cost reduction and minor convenience. It just diffuses into objects, but that's further down the adoption curve. I think we're beginning to see the beginning of it now.
And is that because consumer product makers are now just comfortable adding IoT, and they understand connectivity is a must in all of their? We walk around the floor here at CES, and it's pretty hard to find a non-connected product.
It is in this hall. It is
in this hall for sure.
I think connection is table stakes. If you cannot connect, you cannot send data. So unless, of course, you're a local network and you're having an edge network and you don't need to go anywhere else, right? So that's a different story. But so I think a lot of people have finally started solving the connectivity problem because you have options now, more mature options. So as an example, and this is not exactly consumer, but we also do some work in the smart city space. So we know a city that had incorporated a smart lighting infrastructure, and they used a technology that 10 years back was the only available technology for them to be able to do this, right? So they invested, but hey, 10 years now, we have better technologies, and they've just outdated all their radio network. So what do? So I think there's similar things that we're going to see on the consumer side too, as these technologies evolve. At what point do you enter into adopting a technology? As an example, in my house, you were talking about consumer appliances, right? So we recently did a kitchen upgrade. We updated our refrigerator, washing machine. All of them have Wi-Fi connectivity, and now I'm like, what do I do with this? Right? Because is there some intelligence that tells me that I'm not doing the things I'm supposed to be doing with my appliances, whether that's energy efficiency wise or whether that's occupancy wise or something else. Consumers still aren't sure. So selling smart devices to them will take some more time to kind of fully get the value out of it, is kind of what I'm seeing in some areas.
And unless they're cheaper. So your washing machine,
Yes.
your washing machine, there's a high-tech and sophisticated version of that which has an embedded screen in it and multiple functions, buttons and navigation and dials and so on. All of that is just waiting to go wrong. I mean, firstly, it has to be built, designed. It's going to go obsolete, and as I say, it increases the unreliability. It decreases reliability. If you can just pivot all that out to a handset, you can do the updates in software because the handset's easily promoted to the manufacturer's portal. And actually, what you've done there is incrementally you've maybe made it slightly better, not really to an extent that the consumer would notice, but you've made it cheaper and more robust. And not only that, but the data that you collect can make your next iterations of that washing machine more optimized to the usage profile of a washing machine. Because suddenly you have real data from the field about what needs to be hardened versus where you can cut back on cost and investment. So it's not actually necessary for the customer to directly see the value and say, I must have that because it's connected. There are benefits which could just be cost and future product development.
Yeah, I mean, I can tremendously see that, hey, if my refrigerator or washing machine is not working, and if there was ability for sensors to collect data for the last 30 days, 60 days, I can minimize the technician's diagnosis time, right? He just needs to, just like what we do in our car codes, right? We just put in the car code and figure out what went wrong. So perhaps there's an opportunity in terms of allowing some convenience for consumers there. Yeah. But yeah, everything said and done, I think we have a technical problem that has to adoption problem, and we have a behavioral problem, and we have like a change management problem, right? Yes. So there's different segments of that from an adoption standpoint.
Well, I think what's interesting, and I want to give a couple of examples. I think there's a blurring between what was B2B business in IoT and what's B2C business in IoT. Originally, a lot of the B2B business was about asset management so that they could update, life cycle manage, do predictive maintenance potentially on higher value things that had more software in them. Maybe your really expensive new kitchen appliances. I don't know. I didn't talk to your wife. But those things might be there because the manufacturer of the devices wanted them there. But I think what's interesting is now it will be paired with maybe a consumer app on their phone, so now they get visibility into the device. Yeah. And let's take an extreme example. Infrastructure. Your power meter in your house, which was infrastructure with your utility company, which was 100% a B2B play, is now paired with an app that I can see how much money I spent on my water or my gas or my electric. So there's kind of a joint use of that data, and it maybe gets back to the point you said.
And it might get even more interesting because now if you have solar grid, you're also adding some supply into the equation.
How much money did I make?
Yeah, exactly.
So the question I think is, did the world wake up finally at the consumer level as well as the business level that connectivity and data is of substantial value? And is that the trend that's maybe moving more products and more adoption? You're the analyst. What are your thoughts? Is that a bad assumption?
I think there's a lot of that. I think there's a lot of just the overall technical environment has evolved. And picking up on a point that you made earlier around the uncertainty of standardization, I think we've got to a point where you can be reasonably confident that if you build Wi-Fi and Bluetooth into something, it's everyone's going to be able to connect to that. There's a bit of a question potentially about sidewalk, but there's a significant potential upside there with things that can be supported by sidewalk. So it's becoming lower risk because the choices are becoming more obvious, and the overall just the contextual level of technology adoption is increasing. So yes, I think it's hit a tipping point, frankly.
Maturity of tech. So low power wide area networks are out there. Connectivity prices, modules, the CapEx has gone down. Unlicensed, right? LoRa networks are becoming much more pervasive, not just in the private sector, but kind of national networks are emerging and maturing. So the connectivity technology choices are pretty pervasive and pretty ubiquitous. So to your point, it was maybe just Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and now there's maybe more choices.
Yeah.
What do you see on the future for, everybody talks about 5G. Everybody talks about real-time use cases and real-time needs for 5G and IoT. I mean, I know why it's going to be maybe great on a handset to stream faster and to get better stuff, but where do you see 5G in the IoT space?
So we definitely see a lot of 5G in the enterprise and B2B space, right? Because the promise for getting 5G for the consumer has not been fulfilled to the expectations that was given to us very clearly. Okay, I'm going to get very high bandwidth for video. I'm going to get very high bandwidth for AR, VR, but I'm not using my phone for AR, VR, or video all the time. So therefore, the consumer part is not fully. I know there's a rapid expansion of infrastructure from all the telco companies, and I know that because of the design of 5G, you need to have large density of small cells. So it's going to take time. But I think the concept of building private networks that is kind of picking up is awesome, right? Because why wait for a public network if you can get the business outcome from creating a private network? So I feel that will become a hotbed for further adoption and innovation, which will then trickle down to eventually when the private network and public network infrastructure of 5G kind of becomes similar at some point, that's when I think we'll see real valid out there. But otherwise, I don't need a 5G to find out if my street light is working or not, or I don't need a 5G to do a lot of the things in my house, right? So I think we're in very early stages, but of course there's already 6G discussions going on and work going on. So at what point do we see a maturity in the technology and adoption kind of syncing up?
So you just kind of justified Jim's point, which is it's really not about the tech right now. It's really more about the use cases.
I'm a big advocate of use case problem solving.
Okay, very good.
So uses of 5G. From a consumer perspective, automotive. Automakers just like to have the latest technology in there because it's a differentiator, and secondly, they want the one that's going to have the longest life, so they kind of have to adopt the latest technologies because they want it to be in the car and work for a long time. Really, it gets hard beyond there unless we cheat a bit, and I'll come back to that. VR gaming. Etc. But Wi-Fi standards are catching up as well. So really, and if you want ultra high-speed communications and low lag within a home environment, Wi-Fi will probably be fine, and if not, you can move your router. Cheating a little bit though. MMTC is of course now 5G. It was 4G, but it's been homologated into 5G, which is why it's a bit of a cheat. But MMTC unlocks or includes NB-IoT and LTE-M, which are two low-power wide area technologies, and there can be significant potential associated with those. So these are the things that could, for instance, connect bathroom scales. It's not very exciting and it's not very sexy, but with NB-IoT, with an NB-IoT connection, you can offer a set of bathroom scales which is connected when the consumer takes it out of the box. They don't have to connect it to their Wi-Fi network. The connectivity is not dependent on that Wi-Fi network being up, or any problems on that local network, and also any fault resolution by the manufacturer is much easier because every device is connected to a single network. They're looking at a homogeneous device estate. That's less of an issue in the case of connected bathroom scales, but for instance, in the case of a security system, it could be a much more critical feature. So MMTC, I think, is going to drive a significant number of connections of things which just creep into our lives that are connected because they're better. And with these technologies, it's so easy to do and it's so cheap to do. And from a manufacturer perspective, it gives them direct visibility of that device in a homogeneous way that's not dependent on my mum's and your mum's Wi-Fi networks working properly, which is a risk.
Well, I get that call about once a month.
Okay.
Yeah. No. So I agree with you.
It's been out for 29 days. Can you go and have a look at it?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of truth to that. So what's interesting though is when you look at the license spectrum, you just know it will work. So out of the box functionality. no configuration from the consumer. So that's back to kind of the use case of easy.
Yeah.
Right? So I totally understand.
If you want quality of service, reliability, and security, it's a no-brainer to go with a licensed area, right? Because you don't want to worry about that part of it. Focus on the parts like integration and other pieces. I agree. I mean, when we started off our journey 3-4 years back into looking at IoT connectivity, we were very, very bullish on NB-IoT because we said, hey, this is fantastic. You're going to get the same, you have the same infrastructure that the telco guys are providing for their regular phone users, and you're picking a small spectrum just for machine-to-machine kind of communication. Fantastic. But we didn't see it picking up. We didn't see it exploding the way we anticipated, and I don't know whether it was not enough radio controllers getting propagated into the vendor manufacturers or the right use cases not popping up, but there's still opportunity. So I would say there's still that gap that could get filled up before 5G is kind of used for all these kind of things. Because I feel 5G is a great candidate for video surveillance, live surveillance, VR, AR, those kind of things that requires very high bandwidth, and you don't have latency tolerance opportunity there at all. But for everything else, there's so many other options that's still going to be used.
Okay, very good. So in that licensed NB-IoT, certain geographies, certain operators have deployed, and many have stopped or changed their strategy for NB-IoT. Do you think there's going to be a pivot with the operators to put more NB-IoT? Because really, Cat-M has been the fallback to deploy NB-IoT.
From my perspective, I think the telco players are going to play this by opportunity. Meaning, if they see a significant business driver for following this, they're going to do it. If they don't, because it is going to be economics at the end of the day, which is why we are seeing private networks and unlicensed networks popping up, because you have an alternative to try it out. The question is scaling. It's all great if you want to do it in small quantities, but when you want to scale, do you want the network that you picked to be the one that you want for scaling for the next 10 years or 5 years, right? So that's kind of, when you think about connectivity, that always comes a question mark from my perspective.
Okay. So Jim, I love that you brought in automotive, because CES has become an auto show as well.
Yep.
And guess what? Consumers buy automotive. So that is a great 5G use case. So you put a fork in that one and it's done. That's good. But I would agree that there's challenges in need for some of the other high bandwidth,
Yes.
low latency 5G stuff.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap up pretty soon. Closing thoughts on kind of what we've talked about today, and what might be takeaways to exhibitors at CES who are making cool consumer products, or maybe a network operator that's listening into this, the replay of this session.
I will say this. I was walking by the North Hall here, and I saw this fantastic hologram technology that was real life size, and it was like you would walk in this place and there was this frame where you are projected out there, and it looked fantastic. And I'm like, only at CES. You can only see this at CES. So my recommendation is keep coming back to CES, keep tracking CES, because innovation starts here. And when you see innovation, you start believing it. It's like the BMW changing colored car. Like, if you tell that to somebody, they're like, what? But when you see it, you're like, wow, this is going to change the mindset, right? So I'm very bullish about more and more adoption happening. I'm very happy to see that CES IoT presence is growing. I'm happy to see the convergence of things like digital healthcare, automotive, all kind of coming together, because whatever we're experiencing here is just going to be transported to different industries. So yeah, I'm very excited, and I encourage everyone to keep coming back to CES.
Very good. Jim?
Absolutely. In terms of final thoughts, so I think I'd go to the opposite end of the spectrum. You've done a great job with the high bandwidth and sophisticated end. The less sophisticated end, the low bandwidth, low power wide area connections. I mean, as you said, there are significant benefits. There's a lot of potential in things like NB-IoT. There are other technologies there. There's the Cat-M or LTE-M, and the other thing that's happening now is there are alternative wide area LPWA technologies available. So there are, there's the Sigfox proposition, and also LoRaWAN, which typically has been deployed in private networks now, is now finding itself deployed in as a wide area proposition. So there are several wide area LPWA propositions which are at varying degrees of rollout and adoption, and the number of devices that they support, but there are real options there, and those things do unlock significant potential for some really simple devices, and some really quite technically simple but value added and quite important propositions, like out of the box connected bathroom scales. It's not rocket science, but just to be able to take them out, put them on the floor, and they work, is some significant value.
So what I'm hearing is, if I'm somewhere else in East, West, or not in the North Hall in the IoT space, if you're exhibiting at CES and you're making consumer electronic products that aren't connected, you should make your way down to the North Hall, talk to the ecosystem. If you're a network operator, pay attention to the low bandwidth alternatives in addition to 5G, because scales will be connected and things need to be easy. And if they don't, there's alternatives in the unlicensed space that'll move in.
Exactly.
And they are. And I really want to thank the efforts of both the Consumer Electronics Association as well as IMC to really put the focus on IoT here at CES. The trade show area for us has grown 3 times from last year, which means there's interest, there's engagement. I think the traffic and the other exhibitors that come down here to see how to implement IoT before maybe next year's CES is important, and your insights have been totally valuable. So I really, really, really appreciate your time today, and I want to thank everybody who's watching, and enjoy the rest of your CES experience.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.